I like to try to stay on time. I'd like to welcome you all here. If you don't know me already, my name is Angie Morthland. I am one of many of the board members that are here tonight. I want to say thank you to Donna Fowler for bringing cookies for us. Bill Marvin, thank you for always guiding us in the right spot. Pat Smith is over here. He is always a wonderful guy. Yeah, I got Carla right next to her. Leanne will be doing our Zoom today. Roy is doing our amazing recording that will be on our YouTube channel. And Marianne Moore, yes, she was trying to hide. She's blending in with the art. I am so honored to be a part of the Historical Society and have these two young people and their mom that's out here. She's hiding in the audience. Jeannie's out there. So I have Daisy and Pat here. We're going to talk all about marshals, more about marshals than you've ever thought you'd know. I was walking around. There's pictures I don't ever remember ever seeing. So without further ado, we're going to hear a little bit of sweetness from the marshals.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming out and finding out more about marshals, the family history, and just Marshals Fudge in general. We'll talk about how marshals came to this area to begin with. I might be a little nervous because normally when I'm speaking in front of people, I'm flipping fudge, so I'm not really thinking about. So I pretty much say these same things every day because people ask questions. So if you have questions as we're going through this, just ask.
Yeah, jump in. There's lots of history, so hard to take it all.
So Daisy's family has a lot of history in this area. Her great-great-great-grandfather was the old soldier of Fort Mackinaw on the island. He was the longest serving soldier. He came, I believe, to the island in 1850. And at that point, he had already worked 25 years as a soldier. He proceeded to stick around until, for the remainder of his career. They tried to give him a pension. I think his commanding officer tried to get the area commandant to give him a promotion to an officer so he'd have a pension. Back in the day, the enlisted men didn't have pensions. And so they denied it. So he just continued to work until late 1800s, almost, I think it's like 1898. So he worked at the fort for 43 years. It might have been 48 years, something like that, but a long time. Then he ended up passing away. About 10 years later, they enacted a pension for all enlisted men. So, but he built a house on a piece of property that was from the original land grant on the island, and it's still in the Marshall family. So that's kind of neat. And then he had like 16 kids. He was there for a long time. So he had 16 kids. A couple of them died in infancy. Well, that was later. One of his kids was the first lightkeeper around Island Lighthouse, and he was the first lightkeeper. And that lighthouse opened in 1896. So at the 100th anniversary of 1996, we were actually married on the island at St. Anne's, and that was St. Anne's 200th anniversary. So they had just redone the church, they had just redone the lighthouse.
To party.
Yeah. So there's still a lot of connection there. So that was pretty neat. But so that lightkeeper had a bunch of kids, and they also became lightkeepers. And two of them died in their 20s just off of Round Island. I think they were trying to save somebody else, and they died in the frigid waters there. They're also buried at the Catholic cemetery on the island. So there's a ton of marshals buried on the island also. So there's William Anthony Marshall. The next is another William. That's the first lightkeeper around Island Lighthouse. The next was a wagon driver on the island. And he just delivered goods on the island. And then one of his sons, I believe he had 12 kids. One of his sons was Jim Marshall, Daisy's grandfather. And he grew up on the island, went to school on the island, and he became good friends with the Murdoch, who were the original fudge makers. Good friends with, can't remember his name, I believe it was Gerald. It was Gould's son.
Yeah.
Jerry, and he started making candy with the Murdochs, and that's where he learned how to make candy, had the original recipe, all the techniques, and all that kind of stuff. And then somewhere, I don't know exactly which year it was, but Daisy's grandmother came to the island.
Yes. So, am I taking
Yeah.
over? Okay. So, my grandma was very artistic. That's what you see. We brought her paintings, and she went to Northwestern University and had her art degree that she received there. But she came to the island. She was working on somebody's yacht, some wealthy person from Chicago, as the chef. So when she came to the island, she met my grandfather, and then met, they dated, they got married, and they opened their first shop together that was called Marshall's Driftwood Fudge. And that was located in Ty's Restaurant, which is on Main Street. Is it near where Horns Bar is
Yeah, I think it's either
now?
where Horns Bar is or right in that area.
And that was their first little candy shop, and they received the recipe from the Murdocks with their blessing of a copper kettle, and off they went making candy.
I think there were 4 fudge shops
At
on
the
the island
time.
at the time. So that was the big competition, and that was it. And it was,
Any questions so far?
What
about
year was
all
that?
of that?
What year was that?
52?
Maybe just, yeah.
Does that
early
sound right, Jeannie?
50s,
50s, 52, I think.
Maybe just before that,
Yeah, someone there.
because they did leave the island. They didn't stay there. So in the 50s, they left the island and they went to St. Ignace and they opened the first candy making Mackinaw Island fudge store in St. Ignace, and that was in the early 50s. And they changed the name then to Marshall's Mackinaw Trail Fudge. This was one of the boxes that my grandmother designed, and it has the little trail. You can come up and look at all these that they would drive to, I guess, to go downtown. So that was Marshall's Mackinaw Trail, and that was the early 50s. So my grandmother, she was instrumental being so artistic. My grandfather was too. They both actually drew caricatures of each other. We forgot to bring them. But if you come to the fudge shop now, you can see them both hanging up there by the candy side where they make candy. But they, the men that were working at the time made chocolate pecan, right? Just chocolate pecan. And she was like, hey, how about like something else? So she was instrumental. I guess she started plain chocolate fudge, among others like peanut butter, chocolate peanut butter, Rocky Road. And then she also introduced different nuts like English walnuts and pistachios and black walnuts. We brought some chocolate black walnut for you to try. It's a very interesting tasting nut. It's a little bit smoky, earthy, so it's different than a regular walnut, but you can try it back there when we're done. So she started to do things like that, and other fudge shops followed and started to make those flavors too, which you can find in other places as well. And then she would send my dad, I don't know how old Dad was, but she would send him with a little wagon filled with the candy that they made, and she would send him down to the area where before the bridge was built, and the cars would wait to take the ferries across between the peninsulas.
$1 a box.
Yeah, $1 a box, and sell fudge to all of the people waiting to go across on the car ferry. So that's how he started making, learning how to sell at a young age. And then he grew up on the island, obviously went to school on the island. But when they moved off the island in the early 50s, he started school in St. Ignace and also Florida, because my grandparents would leave this area in the winter. And they had a shop in Hollywood, Florida, and they sold candy in Florida in the off season. So my dad went to both schools, because back then it didn't matter. He would start up here and then he would go to school in Florida. And I think the story is that he graduated from both.
Yeah.
That he likes to say his high school diploma from both. And then after high school, he went to, did he enlist in the Air Force? Yeah, he enlisted in the Air Force. But his parents had told him, you should really start making candy on your own and at your own shop. And they gave him equipment and that, and Kettle said, why don't you go to Mackinaw City? So he started in Mackinaw City. But while he was in the service, my grandpa would run the shop for him, and then my grandma was still running the shop in St. Ignace. So in the Air Force in Bellevue, Nebraska is where he met my mom, Jeannie. She was also working at Offutt Air Force Base in, what was it, the
OSS.
OSS. She had a pretty important job. But they met each other roller skating, and then that was that. They dated and got married. And so every summer they spent their time in Mackinaw City making candy. And then they raised us, my sister Deanna and I, in Big Rapids, Michigan. So my dad was a professor at Ferris State University in the off season, and that's where we spent our winters. And then every summer we'd drive up to Mackinaw and spend our summers up here. We lived in the back of the store for a long time until they discovered Cecil Bay, which they loved, and we would go and cool off and swim. And pretty soon they found a piece of land and they built their house, and that's then where we lived in the summertime. And my mom still lives there today for most of the year until she goes out west in the winter.
Aren't you gonna tell me when they lived in the back of the store?
What about the back of the store?
So they-
There's
So
a lot
during
of
the
stories
summer, they
about
live
living in the back of the store.
And the girls had bunk beds, but
Oh.
in the back of the store used to be a pegboard. So as the customers walked by, the girls would squirt sport the customers with their
Well, my
squirt
mom
guns.
put us to bed, but we were really tired, so we did. We did funny things like that. And my uncles worked for us for a long time. My mom's two younger brothers for years, since they were like 14 and 15 years old. They would come from Nebraska and spend the summers and did all kinds of fun things. And you'll see in a lot of the pictures what went on. So anyway, and then also my mom was instrumental, like a lot of the women of Marshall's Fudge. My grandmother, you know, like I said, started some of the flavors that weren't around. She was, she really pushed the mail order business. So people, instead of just coming in the front door, they could also send fudge to people. And then, you know, little by little, they realized people wanted to do that more than just in the summertime. So when Marshall's became year-round, they started to do that. So there was one customer in particular that wanted to give fudge to all of his employees as a gift at the holidays, and they still do that today. And that was how many years ago?
Seems like yesterday.
65?
65 years ago. And they still do their holiday gift giving for their employees. So what was next? So then, like I said, Dean and Jean, they would come up from Big Rapids because my dad was teaching then, and they would just come up to make that candy for him during the holidays. And little by little, I think they realized people would sort of knock on the door and say, "Are you open in there?" And my mom would have everything covered, you know, with sheets, and she'd say, "Well, you know, I guess maybe we could be." And so they'd let people in, and they'd want to buy candy. So in 1992, that's when Marshall's Fudge became a year-round business. So, and then you might want to know any other questions about this so far, or going too fast?
A lot of stuff.
It is.
What else is next?
Well, how we came here.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. So I went to school at Ferris as well, and I got my degree there. But I left Michigan and moved to California, is where I met Patrick, who was a born and raised Southern Californian, which is unusual. Most people in California are transplants. But he was born and raised in Southern California, and I met him there. I was working in design, and Patrick is an accountant like my dad was. So we started to date, and then I was teaching. I taught first grade for a number of years. And then my parents, they thought about semi-retiring in the late 90s, and we were married in 96, like we said, during the anniversary of the lighthouse. So we talked about it, and we had our daughter, Mally, in California, and she was about 5 months old, 6 months old, so we moved back in 2002. And we continued on with the business, and we've been here ever since. Yeah.
Was your college degree in elementary education then?
No, my degree was in business economics from Ferris, and I also have my paralegal because I thought I'd be an attorney. And then I didn't do that, and then when I went to California, I worked in design for a number of years, and then I got my teaching degree. And I'm an elementary, I could teach like kindergarten through 6th grade with my professional credential from Irvine University in California.
Okay.
And Patrick was working as a CPA at an auditing firm in Long Beach, California. And I lived in Pasadena, and you lived in Costa Mesa. So
yeah.
Los Angeles County, Orange County, all the Californians said that'll never work, you're too far apart, but it did. And then I moved down to Orange County, and that's where I taught, in Orange County. So yeah, and that's how we came back here, and we moved back with Mally. She went to school in Sheboygan her whole life, and now she lives in New York and is working in the city.
Scale of 1 to 10, Patrick, how bad was your first winter in Mackinaw?
Everybody
You know,
asks.
the winters don't bother me at all, never did. It's just the summers are too short. So I was prepared for the winters, but I do remember one of the first winters though, it's just spring, because we arrived on April 15th, and Dean was taking me to the fudge shop that first couple months we go in together, and God, I said, "Dean, this is freezing." He just looked at me and laughed. Now I understand why, but the summers are just too short. But otherwise, you know, people say, how did you leave California? How could you leave California and then come here? What about, you know, do you miss all the people? What do you miss most? I said, I exchanged trees for people. Because in California, I would go to work, 45 minutes commute. I'd drive by all kinds of people. I'd never really look at them, wouldn't talk to them. And now I do the same thing here when I go to Gaylord. I drive to Gaylord, I go buy a bunch of trees. I don't look at them. I don't talk to them. So it's the same thing. So it's good. No, it's sweet. It turned out to be a sweet gig. When we got married, people would ask me, oh, are you gonna take over the fudge shop? I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna move to
It's like
Mackinaw.
there is no way
But
I'm
things
dealing
just
with that.
change. So, and then people ask us about our daughter, is she gonna take over for the next generation? It's like, right now, it's just like she was like Daisy when she graduated
I
college.
left. I
Not
never thought I'd come
interested,
back,
but,
just visit.
but you never know.
Yeah, you never know.
Well, what does your daughter do in New York?
She's in investment banking, so she'll have the idea, at least she'll have the business end of it.
But she has worked in the candy store along with lots of her friends, and when I was young, our friends would come up, my parents would let them live with them, and we'd work for the summer, and it's a really fun place to work. I mean, it's just.
Matter of fact, during COVID, we were down to just the family, and she
We were.
came back from school,
Mhm.
and so it was just 4 or 5 of us working. And so she was there, she was big, instrumental in helping us get through that summer. So she knows the business, yeah.
She does, yeah.
So that's kind of the history of Marshall's and the history of us. Maybe the history of candy making.
Candy making, you want to tell that?
You know, talked about the Murdicks being the original fudge makers. I think I said they were here in, I didn't know this, but they were originally from Vermont. Henry Murdick was from Vermont, and he traveled, his dad went west in the gold rush, so then he decided to go west also. And he met his wife in like New York.
Yeah.
I read this book from Phil Porter. It's all about fudge. It's really interesting. And talked about meeting his wife in New York, and they just started getting in the candy business, and they slowly made their way up into northern Michigan. And then when the Grand opened up, that's when they decided to come to the island and start a fudge shop in it always says 1887 on the island, but it was 1889, I believe.
1889.
Yeah, that's when they first started making candy. So I think that it was a 3rd generation Murdick that Jim was good friends with, and that's when he really started to learn the trade of candy making. Passed that to his son, Dean, and Dean passed that on to me. And Dean would tell me stories, and people come in and say, oh, do you ever spill candy on the floor? And Dean's like, oh no, I was too scared of my dad because he would stand there with a wooden paddle threatening to beat me if I spilled it on. So as long as you pay attention, it doesn't go on, it shouldn't go on the floor. So if you go to other candy shops and you see candy on the floor, it's just people aren't paying attention to what they're doing. So we pay attention to the details.
But you're the rookie now with 28 years.
Yeah, I'm the rookie.
You consider, although he told me the other day that he says, I've done it, I've mastered the fudge making. I have my perfect batch. I don't know which one it was, but he yelled it out and he was so excited, so it took him 28 years.
But Bud, if you've been to Marshall's, you've met Bud before. Bud's been working with a family for 50 years, candy making. You know, Dean made candy for over 60 years. His father made candy for over 60 years. Bud's been doing it for 50. I call myself the rookie because I'm quite not there yet. But
He is, he can do it.
it's really, there's only been a few of us that know the recipe, and we just don't share it. Daisy doesn't know the recipe.
I don't.
Job security.
I can find out, but I don't.
Probably. So, I'm sure you've come in and watched fudge being made. You know, you measure it, you cook it, you liquefy the sugar, you pour it onto the marble slabs. The reason why they used marble slabs, it was the best surface they could find back in the day on the island. Why was it marble? Is because since there was a fort, there was a cemetery. Where there was a cemetery, there were marble headstones, and that's what they used, was a marble headstone. If you go on the island, they're very small tables. Our tables in Mackinaw City are allowed to be bigger because just the size of the store, so ours are very large. They make really small batches. We make batches up to like 40 pounds, 42 pounds, something like that. So it gives us more flexibility. But pour it onto the table on the slab, it'll cools to the right temperature, and then you start to work it. And what you're trying to do is agitate the fudge so it'll start to recrystallize at the right time and the right size crystals. And if you do this in the proper sequence at the proper time for the right amount of time, then it'll actually set up quickly in an entire loaf, and it should be nice and creamy. You should have small crystals, not big grainy crystals. So we think ours is the creamiest fudge in town. So we'd like you to try ours and try others, and you could really tell the difference. So there's a bunch of fudge in the back when we're done.
And you know, it helps that Patrick, he tells everyone, he's the son of a rocket scientist. His dad was a rocket scientist, an actual.
Oh, yeah.
And so he figured out all that chemistry of how to, you know, get the molecules to bounce off each other.
Yeah.
So does Murdick's and Marshall's use the same recipe?
Yeah,
That's a
that's a
good
really good question. So there's the Murdicks sold their business originally back in, see if I can get this right, back in the 30s. They sold their business to MAHS Candy. And they got out of the business for about 10 years. And then they came back and opened another shop. And when they did, then they sold that to Benzer. Like what's his
On
first
the
name?
island?
Yeah, on the island. But the direct, and so they don't use that same recipe. But the direct descendant of Murdoch is Aaron Murdoch here in town. And so his recipe and our recipe is very similar, if not exact. So, and part of that is using ingredients. We don't put any preservatives in our fudge. We still use just true dairy cream, sugar, and that's pretty much it. We use Caracas liqueur, which is a really bitter chocolate. And a lot of other places will put preservatives in it, or they use butter, things like that. And it doesn't come down back to the original recipe. So, but there was a big difference.
There was another question.
Do you still have the original copper kettles?
Oh, look those.
You know, we have copper kettles that go back to, I know, to Daisy's grandmother.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was from Driftwood Fudge on the island or not,
Or from St. Ignace.
but she has a whole, I was gonna bring some, but she has a bunch of different ones. She has really small ones, because she used to make really small handcrafted, let's say a batch of jellies or something like that. She was a chef, and so she was always an artist, so she was always messing around with different candies. So, but we
And
have, it's like a tray of like 6 different size kettles. It's kind of neat.
They nest inside.
Yeah,
I believe that
nesting
she
kettles.
made fudge too.
Yeah.
But my dad wouldn't teach my sister and I how to make fudge. He said, I'm not gonna do it, it's too hard. It's physically, tolling. Bud's had a couple surgeries from it, and he saw my grandma, have to go through that kind of physicality. He's like, I just don't want you to have to do that. So it's fun to try to do it, every once in a while we'll get like a family member in and let them try to walk around the table. It looks so easy, you think you can go over there and just flip it around. It's so hard to do. And usually when something looks really easy, that means it's really hard to do. And our chocolatier that works with us now, she's a 3rd generation chocolatier. You'll see her at the front of the store in the summertime. And she makes all the chocolates. We brought some of those chocolates. And she, makes it look very, very easy. But if you try to do what she does, it's really difficult, because she tempers the chocolate. It's like a chocolate that doesn't have any wax. And so that's an art in itself. And we've come together with her and used some of the things we make that so well. And then now she coats those in chocolate. And so it's made it even better.
So Daisy was talking about our chocolatier, and it's like, what we're doing now is just what Dean and Jeannie did before us, and what Jim and Ordell did. We're just constantly reshaping our business to see what we can do to improve it. What can we add that people really want? And with Dean, he used to make caramel kisses, and they said, well, if I'm gonna make caramel kisses, I might maybe make some caramel apples. So she started making caramel apples, and then he started making caramel apples with nuts. And then we came along, and now we have 10 or 12 different flavors of apples. This is before like the Rocky Mountain Apple Company or Chocolate Factory. So we were doing that a long time, just the process of creating new things. And then we went out and we purchased a bunch of chocolate equipment. I guess it's been 10, 15 years. And with that chocolate equipment came Stacy. And Stacy is a fantastic chocolatier. So pretty much 98% of the chocolates that you see in our store are all made by hand. So I think we have the largest selection of candy in the area, if not, definitely in Mackinaw, if not in the entire Mackinaw area, including the island. So we have lots of different selections and choices.
And we make caramel corn and peanut brittle and cashew brittle and pecan logs. We brought some of those. We make divinity, which is a really old-fashioned candy. We brought a little bit of that. So we make a lot of things.
Finucci fudge, which you do see now and again.
We always have to make candy every day. You can never not make candy. Something always has to be made. So.
We make candy just about every single day, and we make somewhere between 8 to 20 batches of something. And whether it's all fudge or whether it's some of these other candies that we make, we're just constantly producing candy.
And we're lucky that my mom sticks around for a little while and helps us with the holiday season. And Megan, who's back there, who's hiding in the back, you might hear her nice voice on the phone when you call the order. She's been with us for a number of years, and they are very instrumental in helping us get through the busy holiday season, because even though there aren't as many people walking in the store, we're just behind the scenes just with, so many orders. And because my mom grew the business with mail order, it just evolved, and now there's lots of online sales as well. So it keeps us busy. Anything else? Yeah.
I'm always running into you guys at the post office delivering huge.
Yeah.
How much do you ship?
I I don't know. I mean, it's different during the year, you know, it's sort of like the people that come to town, the little light switch that turns on and then the light switch turns off and there aren't as many people. We ship year round. I don't know how much we do in the summer compared to the holiday time. Holidays are our biggest
In
time.
the summer, it might be 100 packages a week or something like that. It's not a lot. In the winter, it might be, like for Christmas, it could be 500 a day, 600 a day.
We go
And-
home and we look at this little app that we have and I'm like, okay, there's 120 orders in the queue. And we go to sleep and we wake up and we're like, there's 220 orders in the queue. And so we go in and my mom's already been in there since 7 o'clock and she has orders everywhere. I don't know how she does it, but she has a way to just remember, you know, everything that needs to be pulled and she starts pulling it. We start packaging it and we take it right next door to the little post office. In our little wagons, you might see us out there in the snow. We go numerous times at the holidays and we just get it out and there's very few of us doing that.
Yeah, we're
But we do
doing-
get help from friends, great friends that come up all the time and help us and.
So we have all the
Nancy or her
individual,
husband's helped us before. There's
we
a
have
lot
all
of
the
people.
individual orders, and then we have all the corporate orders too. So a corporation will call and say, okay, we need 50 of these, or we need, 200 of this, or we need 500 of this. And so when you get to the same thing over and over, it's like a totally different project compared to what we're doing with all the individual orders. But so it just depends on the day. Yeah.
And it can be anything, we kind of let you customize what you want, because people have their favorites, so just do what they
How
want.
many employees do you have?
Year round or?
Well, in the summer, we have about 15 or 16, and then in the winter, we really shrink, and we have about 10, 12. We have a couple seasonal people that come in, but there's really only 3 full-time employees right now, besides Daisy and I. The rest are more
Tiny
just
little
seasonal,
crew.
part-time.
Do you have any trouble with the chocolates, mailing them? Seems like these days the post office doesn't get things very quickly to where they're supposed to go. It'd be,
When COVID happened, yes, it was very difficult, things sat for a long time, but most of the time we have a pretty good record of shipping with the post office.
don't have many complaints about the.
Not usually. In fact, my girlfriend lives in Florida and she wanted me to send her some of the chocolate flip-flops that Stacy makes. There's these cute little pair of chocolate flip-flops and she paints a little edible dust on there and they have a flower. And I said, why do you want me to ship this to you now? It's like 98 degrees there with 98% humidity. She said, I know, let's just try it. So I tried it and they arrived okay. But that's probably because they stayed somewhere cool. She got them in right away, because chocolate really definitely will be affected by the heat. Fudge, not as much. Fudge is really not a problem to ship year round. And we ship it everywhere. It's been to the North Pole. It's been to the South Pole with Jamie Stutz doing some yoga poses with Marshall's Fudge boxes. I don't know where that picture is. I wish I had it, but it's gone everywhere.
Yeah, I got a great story about that. We had someone do an internet order to the North Pole, Alaska. And then the next day I fielded a phone call. A guy wanted to send it to his daughter who's a major in the Air Force to the South Pole. So one day was the North Pole, and the next day was the South Pole. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's sort of fun to see where it goes.
We've shipped to Japan, we've shipped to UK, all over.
Oh, Canada.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you guys were starting to set up, you all said this really neat. When you were setting this up, you saw pictures that brought back an amazing memory or something that you hadn't seen in a long time. Can you tell us, go to a picture that you thought was really unique and tell us a little bit about it? Because that's the part, when you were setting this up, your mom, you, and those of us who were listening a little bit, you came up and said, oh, this would be really neat.
Jeannie has a story about the soap opera.
Oh, yeah, we forgot about the soap opera
Soap opera.
days. The soap opera people
What year
came
was
to
that?
town. Can you tell that story? Nan?
In 95 it says.
95. For some reason, they had a soap opera fanfare here, and all these soap opera people came. Milton Berle, I'm showing my age, right? But they came in, and of course, they wanted to make fudge. So Bud really was smiling, because these beautiful young ladies would come in, and, but they had they had Gilda Radner cancer breakfast, and it was a whole weekend of activities. It drew thousands of people. Then we had a fudge festival, where they created the world's
I
longest
think that's here.
slice of
This
fudge in
long
Marina. I have papers from Mackinaw Journal from those years, and the library had parades. We always had a crazy parade going on.
Oh,
People
yeah.
dressed up as Fudge or Fox.
Yes, we
One
have
of the
the little
employees.
Fudge Princess Jennifer Studs,
He got long red underwear,
right? Wasn't Jennifer the little Fudge
and he
princess?
had balloons.
She was crowned the little princess, that was cute.
Mackinaw was a fun place.
That was the library parade.
And there was a kid that worked for us, he had a VW bug and he would paint it every year.
The reading beetle one year.
Mhm.
What else was he? Bug Guts? Bug Guts one year.
And then he won Pet Most Like Owner, they had to dress up like the pets, and Mitch won.
And here's a photo of Jim Marshall with, help me out, Jeannie.
Jerry.
It's with Jerry Murdoch and then Fran Murdoch. Fran Murdoch's is the grandfather of Aaron Murdoch here in Ireland, but right here in town. But this is at a state fair. So they would go out to a lot of state fairs, and the story was they had these small slabs of marble, so you make small batches. And as soon as they make it, they would slice it and hand it out warm. And then they'd turn around and make another batch, and they couldn't keep up. And so they'd have to actually cool since these slabs are so thin, they would heat up too much and it would take too long to make the candy. So they would put blocks of ice on the slabs to cool it in between batches. So, but that's a neat.
That hangs in the store too, we have
Yeah, we
that
have that.
where they're making candy. My dad made a big loaf of fudge that was shaped like an L. I don't know if he did it for me or just because he wanted to do it, but I don't know if you can see. Usually it's big long, and then he made the little L. I remember thinking that was cool. That was pretty fun. I guess my mom was hiding from all the customers that day. There she's sitting down. We had lots of fun at Marshall's Fudge. We did all kinds of crazy things. My dad, I have a funny story that my dad used to, I guess he liked it and didn't like it. We would, when I was like in college or end of high school, we'd decide to, after playing euchre late at night, let's go make those pecan lugs so Dean doesn't have to come in the morning. So we go in at like 2 in the morning and we'd make the pecan lugs. And then my dad would come in and he would be so mad because he's like, I could have slept in, you kids. And we're like, but we made the logs, Dad, you should be so happy.
I never understood that, and now I do.
And Bud,
That's happened to me a few times now. It's like, oh.
Bud did it with us too,
Yeah.
it was so much fun.
But you guys know the Marshall's now a 2-story building, but this is what it was back in prior to 2000. I think in 2000 is when they put a 2nd story on it, but the old A-frame was the old
Yeah, that's
Marshall's.
a picture of it.
Where
there,
was
too.
it before that?
Same place, just,
No.
oh, before that it was, I guess, a couple years before they purchased this place, it was at Mamma Mia's, where Mamma Mia's is now.
They rented.
Yeah, they rented that spot for multiple years.
Before, after the fire?
Long before the fire. Long before the fire. This is in the, I want to say the 60s.
65, 66.
Yeah, before Mamma Mia's was around.
Above the hardware.
When I was doing Diamond Tour guiding, if you remember, Jeannie will remember, people would say, well, who in town has the best fudge? Who in town has the best food? And we would say, we can't make recommendations. We have to remain neutral. So they would, when the bus would park, they'd follow us.
See where you go?
And it was like the Pied Piper. We'd all wind up at Jeannie's. Your dad was always out in front,
The
with his
Pizza
hat
Palace,
on,
yes.
waving to the buses.
That was his retirement job, the pizza.
Oh, yeah.
Palace, because he loved food.
Just packed the place.
Yes.
What is your best seller?
Fudge?
Yeah, of fudge.
Plain chocolate is still the #1 seller. Yeah, it's still the king. I mean, it's just, and I think that was the flavor my grandma created because, like I said, they weren't making anything but just fudge with nuts. So she did plain chocolate, and it's #1.
We made some other ones over the years. Jeannie created triple chip.
Some
So-
flavors were accidents.
Peanut butter, butterscotch, and chocolate chip, and we saw a lot of that. I concocted a coffee fudge that I think is really good.
We brought some coffee fudge.
My daughter created our wonderful, was it confetti fudge? People call it birthday cake, but there's no birthday cake in it, it's just confetti. Came up with that about 10 years ago.
My
So-
brothers came back and made chocolate orange last summer. They hadn't made candy in 20 years.
Yeah.
But they did. And then they had a slice off to see who could slice an 8-ounce slice. My first brother turned it, cut a slice, it was 8 ounces, because Pat weighed them. The second brother decided he would blindfold himself. So he put an apron around his. Crazy things that happened there, so it really wasn't like working.
And it was and he cut a slice of fudge blindfolded 8 ounces.
Oh.
You nailed it.
And they
So,
hadn't
yeah.
made fudge for 40
Forever,
years,
yeah.
and they just did it like they didn't forget because they worked so long. And they learned from my dad, and he made sure people knew what they were doing. He was pretty particular, you know. And he liked
Union
things
team.
clean and neat, and you know, you did things the Marshall way. And we still do that with the kids now. And they'll say, "But what about this?" We're like, "Oh, but this is the way. You know, this is how we do it." So they
Do you
learn.
guys have a favorite?
Fudge.
Yeah.
Fudge or confection?
I love strawberry, which we brought some fresh strawberry and lemon right now. I love that. But when we don't have that, I love chocolate mint or maple walnut. I don't know.
Maple walnut's great with a coffee in the morning.
So,
But it's kind of like donut. But my favorite probably all time is our chocolate fudge. It's our dark chocolate fudge.
And sea salt caramel, I heard you say, that's almost as popular as plain chocolate now. It really is. When we put our caramel in anything, people really like
Yeah.
that, so,
And that recipe is about 140 years old, and that's
the caramels.
Grandma Ordell's line that comes from her line of the family. It just melts in your mouth. It's wonderful. There's a bunch of those in the back there also.
Oh, there's-
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the paintings around the room?
Oh, yeah, so my grandmother, like I said, she was an artist, so was my grandfather. And not only oil paintings, I think they did line drawings and what else did they do?
Watercolor.
Did she design those stamps that they used to stamp the bags with?
They didn't print boxes, they had a white box and they stamped.
They would stamp it?
So that's what these are.
Yes.
So you guys take a look at these. These are kind of neat. This says Marshall's, and this is exactly like this box in the center.
Right there, yeah. And this was the fort on the island. I don't know, it says the year. She signed it, O Rule Marshall. I can't see the year on that. This is, which lighthouse, Mom?
Can you hold that up for us?
This might be up in the UP. That's somewhere in the UP. Is that the one way up in Houghton, Hancock that we went by? I don't know if that's Copper Harbor. She did a lot of lighthouses. She loved going up to the Porcupine Mountains and anywhere in the UP, and did all kinds of lighthouse paintings that my mom I have, other people, my uncles. And then when they were in Florida, my mom brought some of those paintings. They lived in the Keys, and she did lots of paintings with the shrimp boats and the mangroves. She loved the trillium that grew here that we weren't supposed to pick, but she did. I have a funny story about my grandma. She used to come watch us when we were in Big Rapids, and my parents would come up here to start working, and she would wait till we were out of school. And she had a like Oldsmobile Cutlass with a V8. And she would put us in the back, and she would like to stop at all of the yard sales on the way up from Big Rapids to Mackinaw City. So we would stop, and she would look, and then she'd say, "Okay, girls, now you watch for cops." And she would just floor it. Off she'd go, and then she'd see another, yard sale off, and she'd stop, and then she'd say, "Okay, watch for the cops." And she'd floor it. And she'd go, as fast as she could to come up. And we would always meet at Kenville's. I remember that as a kid, waiting in line to eat at Kenville's Cafe. She was pretty
I
funny.
think I told about the dandelion tea.
Oh, yeah, she'd make us eat weird things. Dandelion tea, and I don't know. They loved morel mushrooms. I can remember my grandma and grandpa coming to our house in Big Rapids and making little morel mushrooms before they go up to Mackinaw. So. What else?
Can you make any savory?
We tried once for Sister Chris. She wanted us to make
That's right.
basil
Basil.
something. Basil, I can't remember. There was something, and she really
It was
thought it
basil
would be
fudge,
good.
but
It was vanilla fudge with basil in it and something else.
it was something else. It was not good.
And I don't think people liked it. Yeah, we only made it one time. Then we didn't make it.
People ask all the time, "Oh, can you make any flavor?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, we can, but we'd like to make flavors that will sell." And right now we have about 32 flavors that we make. Some are seasonal. I don't think 6 or 7 of them are seasonal. So we're constantly going through them. So to add another flavor, we really have to take another one away because we're running out of room and you run out of time to make it. So we're always trading off, do we
Did
want
you
to
tell
make
them
another
how
one
long
or
it
not?
takes to make a batch of fudge? One batch
Oh, I
of
didn't
fudge?
finish that part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about 2 hours. So from measuring to, doing all those things I talked about and then slicing the fudge, cleaning the table is about 2 hours to make one batch of fudge.
Do you ever have any problem getting your supplies?
All the time. All the time. We used to try to source everything local. We had our dairy was Inverness Dairy, and that's like a prime example. And they were then turned around and bought out by Country Fresh, and now we have a difficult time getting it. We can't get the exact cream that we want in the winter anymore. So we have to substitute to a different type of cream. The fudge turns out exactly the same. It's just we have to adapt as candy makers to do it differently. And we don't like to do things different. We like it to do the same thing over and over again. But so yeah, it is difficult to source locally anymore. So like, you know, some of our apples as an example, they come from Washington or they'll come from Brazil. We don't really know because we're just getting them from Cisco or we're getting from Gordon Foods and they just ship us what they have. So it's kind of a bummer.
But we use Granny Smith apples because the caramel is so
Yeah.
sweet. We like a tart apple. Did you have a question up there?
Yes. Is there a big difference in the way you make the fudge with a small batch as opposed to a large batch? Because you said that here you've got a large table, you can make, what, a 40-pound?
Yeah, but we also still make a 20-pound batch, a 20, smaller batch. So there is difference in as far as the timing, as far as how long it can sit there, because obviously it's smaller batch, it's going to cool faster, and it's a lot quicker to get around the table, so it's going to could set up faster for you. So yeah, there's some intricacies. There's difference between making a vanilla and a chocolate fudge too. There's difference between making a vanilla, a chocolate fudge, and a maple or a panucci. So you cook them to different temperatures, and you have to treat them a little different. But
And tell them in the winter what you have to do to the marble slabs.
yeah, I talked about how in the summer these guys would put blocks of ice to cool their tables when they're at the state fair. We actually have to heat our tables in the winter. So we'll put a gas stove underneath our tables and heat them up.
You might smell that if you walk in, you're like, why do I smell?
Why do I smell
Pain.
kerosene?
But
Well,
they
it's
have to,
because
yeah,
we're
heat
heating
it.
our tables.
It's-
And again, we're the only one that make candy this way in the winter. You know, there might be another fudge place or two open, but they'll make a pan fudge, or they mass produce it somewhere else and bring it in. So we're truly the only Mackinaw fudge company that makes, or people that make Mackinaw fudge right here in the city.
Yes?
So I remember as a little child coming in and watching, and coming home and thinking, how did you keep everything clean?
Yeah.
So my question is, how many people, like, normally we see the person walking around the table,
Mhm.
how many people does it take behind the door to make that batch?
Well, it just depends. I think, like during the summer, we'll probably have a crew of 4 or 5. In the winter, it could just be one person. You know, it just depends how many batches we're making a day. If you're going to end up making, 5 or 6 batches a day, you still have time to clean, and so we're constantly cleaning. It's just the health inspector was in, I don't know, a few years back, and he's like, Fudge, he goes, it's not a dirty business, it's a messy business. So, and as long as you keep it clean, it doesn't get dirty. And so, but you're constantly cleaning up the messes. So
I don't remember ever seeing that shop.
well,
That was my dad.
this has to do with her father. He was very meticulous, and he's passed that on to me, and I'm the same
He
way.
would iron creases in his jeans.
I don't do that.
He liked everything just so
Yeah.
and clean. And he said, I want this to be a clean store, and we still do that. I think I prefer shopping in a place when I'm buying food that looks fairly clean. So I just remember always cleaning, and my mom cleans, and we just clean.
When we go to, I like to take our employees to other fudge shops. So if we go to the island, we'll walk around and I'll say, what do you see? And they'll say, this place is filthy. I'm like, exactly. And we go to another one. Oh, this place is really dirty. Why is that caramel corn looks like it's been there for a week sitting on the floor, and ours isn't like that, and that's the concept is I try to show people what we don't want to be like. And so it really helps our employees understand where we need to be. So it's a big part of it.
Where did fudge come from?
Well, I don't know exactly where fudge came from, but the story goes, as far as what I read in the books from Phil Porter, is Henry Murdoch's son, Gould, was the first one to actually take fudge and pour it onto a table. And he became a showman and would flip it on the table and try to get people interested in watching him do it. You could make fudge in a pan back in the day. You beat it in the kettle, pour in the pan, and you'd be done. It's the same thing, but they do it on a marble slab. And so he was the first person to create this Mackinaw style fudge of making it on a marble slab.
We had a question about how many pounds of sugar you use in a season.
Oh, I don't even know. I don't know if I wanna know
In
that.
the summer.
Right, what
Yeah.
is the season, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like the height of the
Like we
season.
make eight to 20 batches a day, but they're all different size batches. So it's really difficult for me to sit here and try to come up with a number without
And he loves numbers.
crunching, without crunching numbers. But it's a lot of sugar. Yeah.
Sounds like a complex question.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Well, if there's no other questions, what I'd love to have you do is, of course, the samples are there, but I'd love you to come up and look at some of the pictures and ask our guests some questions about each picture. But I'd love to give them a round of applause. And feel free to get up, don't rush. Thank you, come on up and.
You're
I'll
welcome.
be taking paparazzi pictures.
Okay, good, yeah. And my mom knows lots of stuff too.
Thank you guys so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Please tell the story how you became Dave.
A lot of families.
Yeah.
Like that.
I couldn't tell that.
I just got married in 1927.
You remember Karen and Mike? Yeah, right. He was putting together, he and Todd was putting together. Washing machine. No. It's gonna be delivered